All right, guys, we got a new section to the America Happens website called the Whistleblowers Forum, where you could go on there and anonymously or using your name post anything that you want and contact other whistleblowers to talk about what's really going on out there.
For the viewers out there, this is Rockne Earles. Rockne is one of the J6ers that was so unjustly thrown into prison. We have a previous episode with him that you can check out on the Blood Money podcast. This is just a few episodes in the past. He had essentially a cellmate that, we hear the story all the time where a lot of our prison population is innocent individuals. And, we were just doing another podcast with a honest sheriff sergeant. Actually, he's a sergeant or was a sergeant, talking about it. This, for example, this Chad Bianco that falsely accused me of all sorts of ridiculous crimes, and then apparently has a history of doing that sort of thing, and apparently has a DA that protects him. Yet, I'm being persecuted for unconstitutional gun charges, and we hear these stories over and over again, literally criminals running our legal system. And this is how you land innocent people in jail. So I will shut up now. Rockne, tell us about, real quickly who you are, what you went through, and lead us up to the story about your cellmate.
Okay, well, Rockne Earles, I'm, 63. Actually, turned 64 yesterday, so I'll have to get used to that. 64-year-old former veteran. A lot of different things I did in life. But anyway, what got me to J6 was just a feeling that, and a belief, a firm belief, and I still have it, that the election was stolen in 2020. And so anyway, that led to my troubles with the federal government and the prosecutors, and I ended up, to make a long story short, September 20th, I was incarcerated at the D.C. Gulag for 4 months and 3 days. And President Trump pardoned me out. But in my, we talked about that in the other podcast, but so I just want to go on to what the topic of today is, which was my cellmate, Dennis Postavoy. He and I were cellmates for 23, 24 days. And I knew him before that. Before my other cellmate was taken out. He was another J6er, and he left the unit. Dennis is a 44-year-old Russian from Siberia. He's married with a wife in Florida, and he has 4 children. One is a newborn, born on the 23rd of January, actually the day I returned home to New Mexico. And he was a businessman. He does, not to go into his total background, but he's been in business with the steel industry in Russia, in Siberia. Mostly that's where he was based out of at the time. But in a lot of other things, salmon. He was working and selling salmon and fish, worldwide, all kinds of different things that he was into as an entrepreneur. And at one point, probably about 15, 16 years ago, he got into making computer processing boards and PCBs, I guess. Anyway, and he was doing that in China, and he lived over there. And then at one point, he because things were getting a little, harder to work with in China at times. Everything he said were usually easy to work with the Chinese to a point, and then they kind of wanted to tend to put the squeeze on businesses and take more control. So then he ended up moving into Hong Kong, which of course was China as well, but wasn't so closely controlled by China. And that's actually where he met his wife, she's Ukrainian, and she's from Kiev. And but so they lived together and were operated several businesses over there. She had beauty salons, youth salons, you want to call them, and he was running his factories where he was making computer boards and shipping them worldwide. And these little boards, they're motor, control boards, whatever. They are in almost everything you have in your house, probably. Maybe not his, but boards like them. They run the cruise control on your vehicle, the ABS braking, the ignition system. They run their smart computer, smart refrigerators, smart TVs, your smart thermostats. Just about everything that's got a little board in it is something akin to what he makes. And they also go into medical devices, whether it's an EKG machine, respirators, you name it. They're in everything. And so that is lucrative business, and he was doing that in Hong Kong. And buying the components from all over the world, shipping them to Hong Kong, assembling the boards and shipping them out. When COVID came along in 2020, 2021, the climate in Hong Kong got very bad. It was already bad before that because of the freedom protests. And he and his wife finally left. And they ended up in 2022 coming to the United States, and right about the same time that Russia invaded Ukraine, uh, which was one reason why, actually, I think it was slightly after that. And he and his wife decided she's Ukrainian and he's Russian, although his family was driven from, his grandparents were driven out of Ukraine under Joseph Stalin to Siberia, probably exiled there. And so he does have ties to Ukraine as well, but they decided both countries were not a good place to be. He didn't want to go to Russia and end up in the military, and he couldn't go to Ukraine because obviously being Russian, he probably would be imprisoned. So they opted for the United States, which they thought was still a very free country. And so he started back into what he was doing, buying and ordering components to build his boards overseas. Uh, and unbeknownst to him, I think one of the first orders that was flagged, because it was a company he always worked for. I don't really want to name the companies right out. I don't know if that's cool or not because I don't want to get in trouble either. But he ordered, there's 60 chips, I believe, 60 microchips that were going to be shipped to Hong Kong that were on a banned list by the State Department / Department of Commerce, whatever, as not to be going to Russia. Well, they weren't going to Russia, they're going to Hong Kong. That order was flagged, and the company then told him to go to another company that they suggested that could fill his orders. And that's where things got hinky. That's where he actually, at one point, started thinking that he was just kind of had some inclinations that the company wasn't dealing with him correctly as far as how they kept wanting to. He felt he was being lured into something, but he just let his premonitions go and went ahead and ordered from them anyway. And he believes that after the fact, it was they were working with the government. But even besides that, he ordered, I think at that point he might have ordered 10,000 chips to ship them to Hong Kong. Same thing to manufacture boards that go all over the world. And anyway, to make a long story short, he was had his, I believe it was probably somewhere in about November, December of 2023 that they came to his house. I don't know the exact dates. The Homeland Security came by, and they ended up searching his house. I think that's when they took his computers, his phones, his his all of his electronics, for all of his computer or business data was kept, all of his records, all of his ordering, shipping, everything. And then they told him he needed to shut down his businesses. Well, all of his businesses weren't the micro processing boards that he was building. He was also into building basically other medical devices, which are kind of typical medical treatment devices that are more to the naturalistic, holistic bent of medicine. But anyway, they told him he needed to shut down everything, including WildCube, which is another device he makes. And he had all these different devices, and he wants to develop them as well. So they told me he needed to shut them down. Well, he kind of sort of did, but he still went about his business to a degree because he was going to, at that point, ship things from Siberia to start a bioreactor in Sarasota, Florida. I believe is where he found the facility. And anyway, it was coming from Siberia, and it's what they do. It's an algae processing bioreactor that takes the byproduct of the algae that separates very quickly. It's what they release when they separate is then filtered and turned into a drink. It's something developed in the Soviet Union, now Russia, 20, 30 years ago, and they've been using it in their sports and to enhance performance, to enhance the body. And it's something that's been proven and used over there, and he was going to bring it here. And on the day it was supposed to ship from Siberia was the day he was taken under arrest on September 16th of 2024 and charged with, I believe, money laundering, fraud of the U.S. government, conspiracy, you name it, all for the microchips he was sending to Hong Kong. And the second shipment never went either. That was flagged. And anyway, I don't know. I can't go into all the details completely on this, but that being said, he's now being held in the D.C. Jail, the District of Columbia Central Detention Facility, and that's where they want, which is out of jurisdiction. And according to you, 18 U.S. Code 3232, you're supposed to be tried in the district where the crime was committed. Well, if that's it, it should be Sarasota, Florida, Southern Florida, the Southern District of Florida. not in D.C. He was told that it's up there because the prosecutor didn't want to fly to Florida. Well, that's neither here nor there. They're breaking the law by taking him out of district. And I was kind of giving him a little advice on to talk to his lawyer, and his lawyer came back and told him that, well, if we push this, they'll deport you. Or, they just had all these things that, well, if you push this to obey the law, we're just going to crush you a little further. And his lawyer's trying to get him out right now on just pretrial because he's not a flight risk. He's got a house in Florida. He's got, wife and children, and, he just wants to be out pretrial. At least so maybe he can put together a defense for himself, and which is hard for him to do. They have all of his business records, which they refuse to let him have, or get into the cloud again, where all his business records are. And so he sits there, and they give him 1-2% of his records, every month at a status hearing. In the meantime, he sits in prison, and his wife and his children sit alone with a newborn as well, and which is the usual tactics of our justice system as I've seen it uh, played out on J6ers and all the people I pretty much ran into in the DC gulag as well. And I'm not going to call it the DC jail, it's the DC gulag. Thank you, United States government, for running your penal system like the Soviet Union did. And I'll flat
I
out
mean,
say it.
so basically, the gist is that this guy, was arrested because they were thinking he was giving some kind of technology to the Russians during a hostile period. Is that the gist of why this guy's
Right,
sitting
right.
in jail?
I think they were accusing him of that these boards he was producing then could be sent to Russia and they could be used in drones that were used for military purposes. And I can't speak to everything because again, I'm taking the man on his face value and everything that he told me, but he even showed me a little bit of the discovery he had that showed the ties from his company and what he was dealing with. And it was really nothing to do with Soviet oligarchs or Soviet, players or, military players. He said that he did cut off, at one point when the invasion happened, he made a decision to cut off all contracts or any dealings with the government of Russia. But it wasn't even set up in business at that time because he was pretty much relocating from Asia back to the United States, not back to the United States, but to the United States, period. And he's just I, and I don't know if it's because of the chips that were going to the or the I should say the chips that were going to go into the boards that they thought might go for into Russia for drone assembly, or if it's more because of the medical devices he's developing, because all those are very cutting edge and are. I'm always of the mind of conspiracy theorists to a degree that
I
Western
mean,
medicine.
when you know how hard they've tried to sell their poisons and how hard they're resisting, simple things like not, using certain pesticides we know kill us,
Oh,
or
absolutely, a lot of these
fluoride.
devices are and he has them. He has had some of them in the United States, and he has showed them to people. He was at the Burning Man, where they had the collection of all these tech gurus in this little particular enclave. He went there just to meet these people, and to show them his devices and show them what he has and what he's developing. And they're freaking brilliant. One is called is you can go to brainsurf.com is one of his websites. And what it is, it's a headband that you can wear and it links in through Bluetooth to any screen, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, flat top, or your smart TV, whatever. And it will show the bands of your brain as it's working, and it shows different colors and it teaches you how to slow down your mind, how to concentrate, how to meditate. And it works. They've been using it in Russia on ADHD and ADD. So they don't have to medicate children. They don't need Adderall or Ritalin or other garbage to give them to poison them. They can just help heal themselves. And it also works on PTSD, for veterans. And that's just one of the many devices that they've actually developed. It's already developed. And he wanted to try to start manufacturing those in the States. So is he being crushed for that? Or is it because he sold, was trying to sell some chips inadvertently on computer processing boards that would end up in Russia, which were it's not even proven. Here again, it's if you know anything about United States prosecutorial approach to things, it's intent. It's not did you actually do something, but you had intent. I guess they can read your mind, kind of like Minority Report. You had intent to commit a crime, so we're gonna, put you in prison for a long time. But and there's this other devices. If you want me to go into a couple of them, I can.
Yeah, please do.
Well, the one is a chlorella, or it's called Alive Chlorella. That's the drink that he wanted to make. It's an odorless, tasteless, but it's full of bio particles that are taken from the algae when it separates. That's one thing he wanted to bring. He was set up to do that, and that has to be done in a very particular facility that has clean rooms, clean laboratories. He had the technicians lined up. He had the equipment getting ready to ship from Siberia, and he had found the facility in Florida that had been built for another purpose, but had exactly what he needed for his purpose. On top of that, there's another. The wall cube is the kind of the same thing. It's like a Rubik's cube, but it's 24 separate screens working off of. You're going to go. I've got to go off memory off all these things that we wrote down. I think I sent those to you as well in a text. The wall cube was one. That one you can look up going to wallcube.com. Again, that's another one of his websites. There is the Richta, which is it's kind of like a needling using laser and magnetics to heal on damaged joints and muscle tears and tendon tears. And these again are all technologies developed and used in the Soviet Union that are very effective. And he has all of those. Either has copies of those, or he has was basically online to start trying to manufacture those in the States by finding just some financial backing from somebody had already had the backing for it or had his own finances ready to set up the Alive Chlorella plant in Florida. He also even has a bottling. That's another one of his businesses because he's very much an entrepreneur. It was oh, I forget the name of the company, but they were involved in like microbrewing and beers and things of that nature. But it's the bottling and again uh, the machinery and processing for bottling, which would go right into the live chlorella business that he wanted to establish. And so anyway, I think the man is being so unjustly prosecuted right now, and the fact that they won't let him out even just pre-trial, which if you know
They,
anything
they
about the
make the,
U.S.
they make the process the punishment, so they teach them a lesson, not to heal. I mean, it sounds like a pharmaceutical company hit job, more or less.
Well, that was one of my first inclinations. I see that he when we were in the gulag together in Southeast 3 pod, he was on one side, I was on the other, and we always did split rec. But through another guy who was in there who I talked to on occasions who would switch sides, he told and got to know Dennis. He told him about my family, my wife and I, we have a kind of an interest in that same kind of a medicine. And, I had a daughter who had some health issues that we had treated, naturally, holistically. And we went through, Western surgery too. There's a place for both approaches to medicine. And so anyway, he actually switched sides. He was able to move from one side to my side so he and I could converse. And that's where we got to be very good friends pretty much for, a month or better, month and a half before we became cellmates. And then once we were cellmates and, started really getting to hear his story, what he was into, this dawned on me almost immediately is I don't think he's in there so much for microchips that were banned, three chips that were on a banned list, as he is for the devices he's trying to develop because they keep trying, hinting at they want him out of the country, and you're right. The process is the punishment because if nothing else, they keep you in there long enough that you'll take a plea deal, a shitty plea deal for a crime you never committed just to get something moving. You know what I mean? They do it all the time. They bring people in with no crime and they put them under the gun because they want them to testify against somebody. It's been proven in the past where they want somebody to actually perjure themselves to suborn perjury on the stand so they can go after somebody who is basically innocent, but they want to get them with a false testimony. So they all have it in prison. And, this it's how they work. The justice system is the devil itself. There is no justice there.
Yeah, yeah, couldn't agree with you more over there. Rockne, did we not go over anything that's worth mentioning before we wrap up this episode?
No, I hope that was enough for you. I mean, it's just, again, just I want this guy to get a fair shake. I want the guy to. I would really love to see his devices developed. I mean, You've got the list of them. I don't know if you have any other avenues to try to get this out into the public eye. I've been trying through the various online news sources as well as other podcasts, and just trying to help this guy out. And for one reason too, I think I mentioned it in the last podcast. Dennis saved my life because when in the cell I was in, on the one side of Southeast 3 and Cell 9, the heat in our cell was upwards of 90 degrees or over 90 degrees. And when we would do 4-day lockdowns, it was heat stroke in there. And then the day we spent one night in that cell, and then he forced the issue the next day, and he got us moved back to his old cell that was actually empty. And there was a difference of 30 degrees. And I think truly, like I said, I'm 64 today. I was 63 then. And I think my systems were failing from the amount of heat we had, and we had no cold water in our cell. There was just no way to cool our bodies. And after so many days of lockdown, it was I was dying. And I told Dennis I owe him a favor. I owe him a debt. I owe him my life. And so I'm going to try to do everything I can to help this man out. And no, that's the last I got to say, man.
Man, we appreciate having you on the Blood Money podcast. For the viewers out there, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Blood Money. Make sure you join us for future episodes, and make sure you check out AmericaHappens.com, where we have a lot of our featured episodes. I will see you all on the next episode of Blood Money. Thank you.